Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Hey guys, Jim here, and I want to be a knife snob. I know it sounds awful and it sounds pretentious, but that's not exactly what I mean. If you go back into my channel many years, you'll notice that the majority of my videos were always about custom knives. And that's something that I think I've always enjoyed the most, is having a handmade custom knife, whether it's a one of a kind or one of 10 or even one of 50 that they made, but just to have that handcrafted goodness. And I didn't care what it cost, because instead of buying 4, 5, 6, 7 good knives over the course of maybe a couple of months, I would take that money and just buy one really great knife. So yeah, this John Graham, rest in peace, was just a $2,000 knife at this point. So you have to be able to justify what you're spending it on. And I think today it's getting harder and harder for newer collectors to justify these prices, when you can spend $300 and get a magnificent knife in amazing materials with killer color combinations and finish variations and whatnot. So it's really difficult to be a knife snob and say, I'm only going to spend this amount of money, I'm only going to buy into handmade customs. And that's great if you can do that. As a matter of fact, I had made an announcement many years ago that I was going to be getting rid of all my production knives, sold them all, and I was only going to own customs. And I did that. I maintained that for a good couple of years. The problem is, as the industry has evolved, we've begun to see better and better knives coming out as mid-tech or production knives. Now, nothing I don't think is ever going to equal the magic of my Anton Knives Boudica Angel's Finger. Not only is it gorgeous and the inlays are amazing and everything else, but his action, the way that he's tuned that detent and the lock bar pressure, the tolerances that everything was made to because it was made one at a time by his hands, it's not like just a drop-free blade as soon as that lock bar is released. It feels like it's going to be, but then it has this control to it that it's not quite hydraulic like we see in Rockstead, but it's not completely drop-free. It's an amazing, almost controlled drop-free. But this is something that I don't believe could be replicated in production knives with any degree of consistency across a large batch. I mean, hell, even if you went to Anton and said, I'm a billionaire and I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars, these are about $1,295, $1,300 as this one sits. I'm going to pay you $2,000 a knife and I want you to make 500. I don't believe that he can make all 500 with the exact same action. They'll be very close, but I don't even think he can replicate that, because when you get into those large batches, there's going to be variations. So I don't think that you could sit down with any factory, no matter how good they are, and get them to consistently produce a product to that degree. So there's always going to be a want and a desire and a place for high-end custom knives in the industry. Go back to the original pullback Quayback here. This was back then around $1,200. You would spend about $2,400 or $2,500 to get this, because there were only 24 of these made. It was the first batch of full customs by Jake in the Quaybacks, and with only 24 in existence, and as flat out perfect as this knife was, well, you're fighting the degree of quality plus the scarcity, and those two combined make a Grail knife, and that makes it a Grail price. Yeah, he makes modern production versions of it, but they lack this soul. It's not exactly the same. I have one. I just did a review on it, and I really like that knife. It's a good knife. This is a great knife. But then you have some that really blur the lines. You get into something like the Reich Knives Lamella. These were, what, $425, something in that range. Still expensive for a knife for a lot of people, I know, but talking just to high-end collectors, this is a drop in the bucket. I mean, comparing in price again to this DSK Tactical, which was a $1,300 knife. Pohan Lu might well be one of the most affordable of all my full customs. This was, I believe, at the time that he made this would have been around 2014 or 15. I believe this was $850 if I'm not mistaken on the Hamachis. So very inexpensive. But so $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 knives sitting here, and I can tell you right now that in the beauty of the design, the execution of the machining, the fit and finish, we'll take the innovation off the table of making it look like it's an integral when it's not, and that action, combined with the fact that you have 3 or 4 different deployment methods, makes this a lot of fun to have. This blurs the line between high-end customs and full-on production knives where they can make 1,000 of these, 2,000 of these this year, maybe even more. And it feels special. It feels amazing. Now, Persian may not be your style, so, take your personal feelings of style out of it and just look at it for the quality. The VBR, I think, is another great example. The Varga Knives VBR, these are OEM'd by Riyadh. And there's a few Riyadh knives sitting here on this table. This was about $300. And I would put this up against any $850, $900 custom-made knife of a similar design. Go back to 2007, Kirby Lambert Snap, right? When I got my first Snap, when I got my first Orion, which are both of his bolstered knives at the time that were in the smaller size, the Snap being the flipper, the Orion being the thumb stud. I was overjoyed. It was one of the first times I had a compound grind like this. Actually, I had his NGT grind, so it was one grind on one side and compound grind different on the other side. But this knife has a very similar look and a very similar feel. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, when I opened up my very first VBR, this is my third, and I put it in my hands and I felt it, and I kind of flicked it a little bit and flipped it, and I held it in my hands and I felt the ergonomics, and I went, it's really hard to tell somebody to not buy this at $300 and instead go spend $900 on something that looks similar in a custom-made knife. Now, in today's world, that same Lambert Snap would run you in the range of about $1,800. So that spreads things even further apart. Now, yes, you would, if money is no object and you have the patience of a saint, sure, you get the Lambert. You'll never, ever, ever be disappointed. I've always said he was one of the most consistent custom makers in the world. Knife to knife to knife to knife. The lockup, the detent, the action, everything just felt like the same knife from knife to knife across years of making. And I got to tell you, this is really, really, really close to being that level. Fidget factor and fun. The EMP Nimble. You guys know I have a few of these as well. Man, oh man. Again, in that $300 price range, I've got premium steel. I've got a fantastic titanium frame. I've got a flipper, a front flipper, a reverse flicker, and he's getting ready to add a button lock version to these knives, which is going to give you another option for deployment and unlocking and fidget factor and fun. And this is one of my favorite small knives to carry. You know, I don't really have anything in the custom world that's quite this small, but this Plunkett Warney, beautiful, really badass full custom. in that, and actually he's very, very, very affordable. I'm blanking on the price. If I remember, I'll put it on the screen here and you can see it. But even this was really affordable for a full custom. There are some production knives on this table that are every bit as good. It doesn't have a time capsule of that maker's life built into it. You know, this could be a week or two of that knife maker's life invested in that one knife. And there's something to be said for that. It's very, very important. Brian Winters, man, he has been killing it with the Factor, and now with the Mirage. Guys, again, these are, what, $375, $400, I think, on a magnetic assisted opener. Oops, that I can't seem to do left-handed for some reason. You can't even buy into this innovation in a custom-made knife because nobody works with magnets. The design is ultra-modern. It's expensive with the titanium sections and the carbon fiber sections and the steel and the way it's all sandwiched together. This would be a $2,000, $2,500 knife if it were achieved by a custom knife maker. It's hard to justify to people why you're going to spend that much. Brian Brown is a great example. Here's one where this design is offered in a full custom knife or a full production knife. This is the Riot Production Jaeger M. These were $360, I want to say. And to buy one of his customs, you're going to spend triple that. Now, his customs are amazing, but this is everything that I wanted. It's beautiful. It's got great materials. It's got a nice action. It's got everything that I want in an EDC. Is it as collectible? No. And there's the rub. If you're going to do this and want to maintain collector value, the lowest you're probably going to want to go is a semi-custom, like this Avian Knives Atlas. This is a semi-custom. The parts are machined, and then those raw components are then, everything else is done by hand. Everything is fit together by hand. All the finishing is done by hand. The blades are ground by hand. The edges are done by hand by one man, by Seth Taylor, GDS Knives. And these are $650, and the prices are probably going to be going up. But if you're a collector that wants to buy into value, the lowest you're going to go is semi-custom. Are there exceptions? Absolutely. There are production knives out there that do go up in value. It's just not very often. But when you get a feverish fan base behind them, like the Jaeger M, that's a really good example. There are variations of this knife that are selling for about 25% over original retail. Now, that's not a huge appreciation, but considering these have been out for less than a year, that's not too damn bad. What's it going to be like in 5 years? And there's even two of these myself that I desperately want to get my hands on. The Sunset Orange inlay and the Brittany Blue inlay versions. But fewer were made. They were snatched up immediately. And those are two of the ones that have gone up a little bit in value, because everybody wants them. These Jack Wolf knives, I got to tell you, man, I never ever thought I'd see the day where I would fawn over a slip joint. $300 on a full production knife. But to get one, a slip joint at this level, you'd be spending about $700 or $800. To go, into a higher level, you'd be in the thousands. Slip joints can get very expensive in full customs. But this is a knife that I'm going to be using all the time, enjoying, having fun with. Really don't want to cut my finger off. Crazy hollow grind. Drops right in the pocket. And I didn't have to spend thousands of dollars because I wasn't really sure how I wanted to, do with, if I wanted to get into slip joints or not. And I think that was the perfect gateway drug. $300, It's a lot of money, but it's not crazy. Since I don't know the slip joint market, I don't know what the resale is like. Do I want to go out there and buy a handmade custom that may cost me 3 times the price, that I might lose my shirt on if I go to resell it, if I decide, hey, slip joints aren't for me? That was a really, really great way to go. And it's these knives that are some of the ones that are sitting out here today that are changing the market. I'm okay with not being a knife snob. I'm okay with not having my entire collection, or even half of my collection, be full custom knives anymore. Because I get so much enjoyment out of every knife that I've got. This little Devo knives stout. I think these were like $265. One of the most comfortable working knives I've ever owned. Yeah, it's got some great materials and it looks really, really good, but I have found this to be a fantastic working knife. I've enjoyed the living shit out of it. Let me get some of these out of the way here just because I want to be able to rest my elbows a little bit more comfortably. There we go. Now, in the long run, even as much as we love these great values in these production knives, are they going to hold their value in the future? It's really, really hard to tell. You can go back and find a handful of full-on production knives that are worth a lot more than they were when they originally came out. Zero Tolerance 777, the Damascus version. As soon as that came out and it sold out, and then they announced, hey, we actually made a boo-boo. It costs us way too much to make this composite blade. We can't keep making these for the price we're charging, so we're ending it. We're never going to make it again. So the prices instantly started going up. And next thing you knew, you had a $700 knife in your hand instead of, I think they were $425, $450 at launch. Now today, you're talking over a decade later. If you ever see one for sale, $1,000 would be a gift. There's no way you would touch it for that. But that's a rare, 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 rare thing. You know, nobody's giving you twice retail for $110 because it's just a production knife. It's a good knife. It's a standard. It's a classic. But it's just a production knife. Nobody's going to give you double your money for, you know, a bug out. They never will. There's never going to be a bug out that's going to be worth double its value in the future, even if they stop making it, because it's just a production knife. But these small batch runs from these smaller brands, like this is the, I'm actually wearing the hat, Brass Brigade, very hard to say. This is the Jason Grant company, the Grant Gripper. It's a small production on a unique design that every run he's going to do, he's probably going to change up the variations. He probably won't make this configuration available again. So this has a higher likelihood of going up in value, but that's assuming that people really like that particular knife. I do. I think it's a fantastic knife, but does it have a mob of collectors just, you know, seething that it's not made anymore and they want to get their hands on a particular one and they're going to pay crazy money? Probably not. And that's really for, you know, half the production knives I have sitting out here. But the most unique tend to be coming from these smaller brands. Here's a good example. The Null Knives Grace. If the batch is small enough, and I know it's going to sell out immediately, but if the batch is small enough and it sells out quickly enough, I think you'll see people selling these for an extra $100 or so over the next year as it comes out. But 5 years from now, if he never follows up and they never make another one, this could be one, because it is so unique, that could go up in value tremendously. But it's never going to be like investing into a legacy maker. And I think that's where my internal struggle is. Yeah, I would love to invest in just a Tom Mayo Dr. Death Jr. flipper, or a Terzola ATCF or Eagle Rock, or any number of just amazing custom knives that I can rattle off the top of my head, because I know those legacy makers, those whose names will live on far beyond their living years, that have contributed to the knife making industry and created things that we see in other knives going forward. Those knives are always going to appreciate. There are knives, I'll tell you one quick story, and if this doesn't tell you to invest in some custom knives, I don't know what will. I had one particular custom knife that I absolutely loved. It was my number one favorite for the entire time that I owned it. It dominated my collection. That knife at the time was $26.75 as I commissioned the build. A number of years later, I forgot what it was. It was when I started my business, when I started making knives. And I'm like, man, I've got to invest in all this equipment. I literally had nothing for making knives. I needed grinders, I needed drill presses, I needed all these things. And I contacted the maker. I said, as much of a bond as I have to this knife, it's gone up so much in value that I can use this basically as capital for starting my business. I'm like, I don't want to get rid of it. It has nothing to do with the knife. I need to make an investment in my future. I'm selling a bunch of knives, and I think this one will help get me up to where I need to be equipment-wise a lot faster. And he was amazing about it. He's like, not only do I support you because I know that this is going to something important, he goes, and it doesn't break my heart. He goes, it's yours to do with whatever you want. He goes, I have customers coming to me all the time begging me to make that exact knife that I had made for you, that you kind of made famous, or however you want to word it. And I'm backlogged so deeply, years worth, that they'll be happy to buy that from you. He goes, let me pitch it to a couple of them and see what they say. And they began bidding amongst themselves. I did not dictate the price. My knife, as it was made, was worth $26.75. By the time those last two collectors were bidding against one another, it was $12,000. That is a freakish amount of appreciation. And not a number that I would have ever come close to charging somebody. I was thinking it was going to be, $5-6 grand I felt was appropriate, double to a little more than double what the original build value was years earlier. And when he texted me back and went, all right, looks like we've got a winner, $12,000. What's your PayPal? I'm like, oh. I almost cried when I was boxing that knife up to send out. However, when I really thought about it, I'm like, the appreciation that knife gained in such a short amount of time it's staggering. And yeah, your mileage may vary. It's going to depend on the maker, the model, the materials, when you bought it, when you're going to resell it. We saw the stilettos, the custom handmade stilettos of the 80s that people were paying, $5,000-$10,000 for, that now today, because the bubble burst on them, you couldn't get $300 for them. So you do have to be wise about what you're buying. I think it's a little bit more treacherous in the custom knife world than it is in production knives. Most of us would be happy to just break even. If we decide, hey, you know what, I liked this knife when I got it a year ago, but it's not my thing anymore, and I've got something else I really want to get my hands on. So I'm going to take this Pena Mula and I'm going to sell it, and I'll be happy if I break even. Be really happy if it gained $50 in value. These were $295. This was the collaboration with Sons of Liberty Gunworks. And when I ordered it from them, I paid full retail, and I have no idea if it's worth more at this point, because I only know one other person that owns one of these, so I haven't seen any trade or sale activity on them to see if they've gone up in value or they've gone down in value. I really have no idea. I don't care, because I really like it, and it's probably going to stay in my collection for a good long time. But yeah, you're usually happy on a production knife if you can break even and just not lose money on it. And every now and then they'll go up a little bit. And then every now and then, rarely, they really go up. But when you get into a full custom knife, you're buying from the right maker. You're buying the right model. Like with this John Graham, this is a Razel. This is the model that, really put him on the map, that he is most recognized for. That signature, I'm not touching that because it's a sharpened edge. That is a signature of his. That is something that he created and he's best known for. So everybody loved John. He was a phenomenal person as an individual, an extremely talented grinder. I mean, that man could grind a blade like nobody's business. So his work became very desirable. And he didn't really make a lot of knives every year. He was one of the more medium output knife makers. And this is a knife now that's worth a lot more than it was before. There are models that he made that, probably haven't gone up in value because they weren't as popular. So buying into the right maker, into the right model, even down to the right configuration, and buying at the right time, they're all very, very important steps. But if you do all those things right and you hit that magic, got that great maker that everybody wants one of his knives, you've got that knife that everybody wants, you've got a configuration that's very, very desirable, you bought it direct so you got the right price, or you only paid a little bit of a premium, and then it's been just long enough where people are still talking about it and still wanting it, and they'll pay you double, triple, quadruple what that knife had originally sold for. That's something you really don't see often outside of the custom knives. So my dilemma is this. There have been so many fantastic production knives coming out, and yep, so many of them coming out of China, whether we like it or not. Doesn't affect me. It doesn't bother me. I have no problem with it. A lot of people out there, like you guys, have voiced your concerns about it. It's not American made. I get that. Totally fine. But there are so many that are coming out now that just blow my mind. That I don't feel. Let me take that back. That I feel I enjoy those knives a lot of times more than the much more expensive ones. I can't tell you how many hours of my life I have wasted sitting here flicking a nimble. Open and closed, just fidgeting with it, flipping it, flicking it, everything else. My Terrain 365. That action, just feeling that action. It almost doesn't exist anywhere else. That is that truly hydraulic action I was talking about. Now, I could get that in a Rockstead in this size, $1,200–1,300, or mid-300s, and it's Terravanti. This entire knife is completely rust-proof. This can be dropped into the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean and retrieved 5 years later, dried off, rinsed off, and it will be in the exact same condition that it is right now. It cannot rust or corrode. I can't say the same for that Rockstead. As great as the Rockstead is, and I'm going to get so much more enjoyment out of this knife than I will out of that for a fraction of the price. And that's the dilemma that all these production companies are creating right now. One of my next purchases this year, as soon as they make another batch and do another drop, is going to be another version of this knife. Well, not this model, but an all titanium Terrain 365. I am beyond excited for that to come out. And it's a drop in the bucket compared to, a full custom knife. So, I don't know. I would love to just say, screw it, and buy nothing but handmade custom knives, and where this would cost me $300, I'll spend $2,000 to have a custom made one done to my specs. And since I don't I don't care right now about the resale value of either one. I'm just buying for my own satisfaction, and I'm buying for my own daily use. I'd rather buy, 6 or 7 of these for the price of one custom. And if I was if I was talking to my past self when all I did was buy customs, I would slap my today's self silly. I'd be like, what's wrong with you? Why would you ever not want to buy a custom knife? The production, the quality wasn't there back then. And I think that these great designers, and we're talking about guys that already make their own custom knives, Brian Brown, Enrique Pena, who else is production here that also makes customs? Brian Winters has made customs, Jake Hoback. They're all telling these factories what they expect. They're raising that bar consistently. And it's them that changed it. So when you really think about it, the men that changed the industry over the last couple of decades and started making tactical knives, and started making flippers, started making frame locks, they're the same guys that went, now it's time to revolutionize things again. Now let's find a way to make inexpensive, mass-produced knives far better than they have been in the past. More desirable than they have been in the past. I mean, one of the big reasons I love these Jack Wolf knives so much is because of the materials. I mean, both of the ones I've got here have fat carbon. Well, shit, man. Fat carbon's a great material. And the looks are a lot of times what drive us into a purchase. If that was Stag, I wouldn't have even looked at it. If that was just all titanium, I don't know. I don't really know where I would fall on that. But the material choices. So these makers and these designers went, we're going to take this design, we're going to upgrade it with these exotic materials, these rarer materials, these newer materials. Camo carbon and fat carbon have only been on the market. With camo carbon only a couple of years. Fat carbon 6 maybe at the most. 5, I think. They're changing the game, and they're going to continue to evolve. They're going to continue to push these OEMs to making better and better and better knives, to the point where at some point people may just stop and go, I don't see a need in buying a custom knife anymore. And I dread that day. I love all these production knives. I do. I enjoy them. I cut shit with them. I carry them. And I do it a lot less guilt-free. A lot more guilt-free because it is a smaller investment, and or they can be replaced. If I go out and I decimate this blade and I just thrash it and trash it, am I going to be able to have him make me a reblade or do a reblade for me? Most likely not. Probably has to be an all-new knife. Well, how stacked are his books at this point? Is it a 6-month wait, a year wait, a 3-year wait, or his books closed? Does he no longer make this model? There are those concerns. But there will never be, I don't think, a true replacement for a craftsman making something with his own hands. And even if they are a CNC machined custom knife, like the Oz Roosevelt or the Grimsmo Norseman and Rask, the talent that those men are putting into those knives with their knowledge, with their practical application of that knowledge, and their artistry, their skill set in their artistry that creates ultimately what you have in your hand. It doesn't happen overnight, the training, the learning, that doesn't happen overnight. And certainly the execution of each individual knife doesn't happen overnight. So I really hope, as much as we all enjoy our production knives and we continue to buy them, I just hope that it doesn't further and further and further squeeze the custom industry. So I guess there was more than one topic here. One, yeah, I want to be a knife snob and just buy custom knives, but I can't because there are so many really, really good small batch production knives that I drool over as soon as I see them. Again, go back to that Null Voodoo. I cannot wait to get my hands on a Voodoo. Very excited about that. And the other subject, I guess, really is, are we watching the death of the custom knife coming slowly? I talked about this a lot of years ago, that, you know, the lines are getting blurred, the productions are getting so much better, but they're so much better now than they were back when I first discussed it, that I see it as maybe a possibility. I mean, a lot of these custom makers have seen the writing on the wall. They're saying, hey, I can only make so many knives. I'm going to put one of my designs out there and let a company make it for me and put it out there as a production knife and just let the money roll in. And maybe they see it too. Maybe they're going through that whole Blockbuster Netflix thing. You know, whoever thought video stores would disappear? Now you can't find one. There's a couple family video stores every now and then, but Netflix destroyed them. Then Netflix further destroyed themselves, because who orders DVDs through Netflix in the mail service anymore? Netflix is the online streaming now, so that took over for what they had taken over and taken away from the Blockbusters of the world. So as industries evolve, we see things that we never thought would disappear just be completely gone. So I want to hear your thoughts. Don't worry about how you personally feel about your collection. Talk about how you feel the industry is going from what you're seeing. You're in the knife groups, you're in the forums, you're in the YouTube community, you're buying and selling and trading, and you're watching all your friends doing the same thing. What do you think is going to happen? Number one, do you think that production knives have finally gotten to a point where they're so good they are creating a little bit of a danger for the sales of custom knives? And do you think that custom knives in the next 20 years may be a thing of the past? A, I really, really hope not. A, because I make them, but I hope not, for all of the amazing artists that are out there creating jaw-dropping work that you really couldn't replicate in a production knife very, very well. So I don't know where I stand on either one of those. I do believe that the production knives are getting really, really, really good. And I don't mind investing in quite a few of them. But I don't ever want to see customs go away. Because there's nothing as special as sitting here holding this knife and knowing I am the only person in the world that has this exact knife. One of a kind, period. Is this knife made just as well? Is it engineered as well? Is it executed as well? Pretty damn close, yeah. Almost can't tell the difference. But this one has a soul that this one's never gonna have. And I think it comes down to that for me, for all of them. I'll carry my soulless knives and I'll collect my soul-filled knives. How about that? Sound off down below. I want to hear from you guys. Thank you for joining me as always. That was a ramble that kind of went in a few different directions, and I apologize for that. But as you see, I'm unscripted and I'm live, and I'm just doing it and just kind of saying whatever pops into my pea brain. I'll catch you guys on the next video.